Watch this. No way!
It's weird having you on the pod, though, isn't it? Because for most of the time, we've quite enjoyed standing behind Simon Haines, standing in front of, rather, Simon Haines' good work. Be it imagery on a film.
Yeah.
Or the odd nugget. And yet we've known each other for years and never actually got you on the pod because it felt like, oh, what we're going to do, we can't just bring you on and talk about black and white photos, can we?
Well, it's kind of difficult to, show my black and white pictures on air. Got a face for Twitter.
When did we first play together? I got a feeling the first time I met you, you were a guest of Cal's at Blackwell.
Probably, yeah.
And I think then probably a year or two elapsed, but then in earnest, then probably 2020 at some point, and then we spent quite a bit of time together since.
Yeah. Probably, yeah, it would have been through Cal, who I knew through the surveyor scene in Birmingham.
Is that the day job, surveyor?
Not for me now. I sell broadband rock and roll for BT.
But that's not I'd say your primary passion, is it?
Certainly not, no. So
how would you introduce yourself? Are you like an architecture expert? Are you a golf historian? Where does one stop and where does the next begin?
Probably a golf course historian.
Okay.
So I'm certainly, whilst I have a passion for sort of all things history, and I'd say probably pre World War II would be my sweet spot. But my primary interest is the history of courses, the design, and then you kind of naturally go into stuff that's happened on them, so it takes you into players quite a bit. And I guess if I was into players, it would be Bobby Jones over anything else. So, but it's the history of courses and the design, really, which I got into through my home club.
There's thousands of directions we're going to take this, and there's loads of things we need to talk about, and I can't wait till we get onto the primary reason we've got you on. But
we should start with the setting. We should start with where we're sat, just for our listeners' benefit, because they might hear some jangling of glasses.
We're in a pub, which is quite nice. A pub in
Red Line.
In
Bit of Pete Dye influence around us, would you say?
The timber, yeah.
There's some sleepers keeping the ceilings
timber
up.
retaining wall, keeping us from the bar.
But no, it's kind of a halfway house of where we all live. Simon is currently sipping on a Guinness while Sam and I are having our pissy lagers. But let's start from the beginning with it, Simon, really. And where does the passion start? Where does golf start for you? And why suddenly the nerdiness over the history of the game?
And it's a pretty niche rabbit hole I've ended up going down. So, pretty normal getting into golf story. So I grew up playing golf with my father. Joined Copteith Golf Club in the UK Midlands in 1989 as a sort of 13-year-old kid. At which point, I would play a lot of local courses and always appreciate my home club being better than average. And then increasingly my father would take me on away days and we'd go and play courses all around the country, and then you really start to appreciate the difference between good and bad golf. And the more I looked into it, the more I found synergies with good places in my home club through the architect Harry Colt. So Harry Colt designed Copteith in 1912, 1913, which was pretty much his heyday. So he stood down as secretary of Sunningdale in the sort of March of that year to go to be the first full-time architect.
Yeah, travelling architect.
That wasn't a professional golfer prior to that.
He was the first one to really create that profession, right?
Yeah, and he was building courses prior to that, but that was really his probably most productive year. If you look at got St George's Hill, the likes of Camberley Heath, Copteith and a bunch of others in that South Birmingham belt he was working in.
Because he was a Worcestershire lad originally, wasn't he?
Went to school in Malvern.
Yeah.
Yeah, played on the Common. I think he played his first golf on the Common course which doesn't exist anymore. But and then had his first real taste of designing courses down in Rye, which he famously worked on in 1890 something. So he was building courses before he went sort of full time, but that 1913 year was the real sort of stepping out from his day job to just be a full-time architect, and then he went over to the States, and his one trip is a bit like Mackenzie's trip down to Australia in the mid-20s. It's a pretty seminal moment in American course design.
Was that the finishing of Pine Valley then?
Well, it wasn't the finishing, but it was the really helping finalise the routing that Crump had been struggling a bit to complete. So famously, Colt on his visit, so he was there for a week staying in a tent on the property there in sort of late May 1913. And
late May, roughly
May.
Lovely May.
How do you just pause there? So when you say late May,
unfortunately, I don't know the specific dates.
I feel like you're living in a different era, and I think that's where you're able to talk about dates with precision. Because anyone would have given you a pass on May 1913. No one would have gone, this guy's an absolute amateur. Like, anyone knows that was the 23rd of May.
Well,
how do you know that?
We are a friend of mine based over in Chicago, John Challenger. He's trying to get down to the specifics of the hotel he stayed in and what he had for breakfast. So, some of the work that we're doing with historians around the world, actually filling in some of the blanks, has helped with some work they're doing in Chicago, because Colt was in Chicago on that trip. He'd been to Detroit previously, and Hamilton and Toronto Golf Club up in Canada as well. And
massive travel.
Well, in those days, if you think you were going on a ship across the Atlantic, it would take you 5 to 7 days to cross, and then you're on railroad. We've been doing some work to try and piece together his whereabouts in Chicago, because he worked at Old Elm and Indian Hill, which are John's home clubs, and they're trying to figure out exactly what he did at Indian Hill.
If you excuse my ignorance, what kind of legacy has Colt got in America? Like, what clubs was he? Obviously, he's famous for being involved with Pine Valley. Outside of that, I wasn't aware he had a massive kind of influence in America.
The Colt design company, I guess, if you include Allison and Mackenzie in that, obviously had a pretty wide-ranging...
Were they together for a while, Colt and Mackenzie, then?
Yeah, although they didn't do any work together, they kind of split. When Mackenzie was over in the UK, he would do a lot of the northern courses and leave the south to Colt. But most of the work in America was sort of Colt did 3 trips, so he was leaving people with plans, and a lot of those plans still exist. The Pine Valley ones famously, but there's some beautiful old plans at Old Elm as well in Chicago. But Allison was probably the most prolific member of that partnership over in the States, and obviously into Japan as well.
Of course.
And Colt didn't travel after the First World War to the States. That was it. He just did those 3 trips, wedged between his finishing at Sunningdale and going the First World War kicking off.
It's been said a few times, isn't it, on the pod, like the characteristic between Colt and Mackenzie is so different. You know, Colt was like a bit of a home bod, maybe like a sort of a man of modest means is the picture I get. Someone who was, very competent, but was quite happy knowing he was competent, and he wasn't at all flamboyant. And Mackenzie was, the ultimate salesman and master
himself.
Tactician. Yeah. But just before we get too far down that rabbit hole, like when you're playing junior golf, and obviously you're there playing a bit at Copteath, you sort of, quite like this golf course. You play the junior circuit around the Midlands a little bit. You play some of the stuff, and you play the newer stuff. But then you go to maybe like Moseley or whatever, and you go and say, there's some similarities. You start to build a picture in your head. When did the sort of penny drop where it was like, Oh, okay. I can actually really buy into this whole architecture stuff, or is it just a gradual evolution?
No,
the more you play, does it start with just wanting to play more courses, and then you become into that by proxy? I don't know.
Yes, I can remember going on trips with my father to Wentworth and having seen it on TV.
Match play.
And you saw it twice a year on British terrestrial TV. So it was a bit like Augusta. You saw it every year. It was very familiar. And I loved that place, probably more then than I do now. And Royal Porthcawl. So I used to spend a lot of time at Porthcawl and just absolutely loved it. And I can remember clearly seeing the Tom Simpson sketch in the locker room and thinking it was really cool. And it's still there now. And Tom Simpson was an incredible architect, but also a ridiculously talented artist. So those sketches are just awesome. Yeah.
Well, we've got some of the old sketches of Blackwell.
Yeah.
Which are obviously just fabulous to look at. When you're growing up, and you said you grew up playing Copteith and playing, Porthcawl. These aren't, but these are good places. You're on the junior circuit as well. I imagine if someone grows up on a diet of caviar, it tastes a bit weird when they suddenly eat fish fingers.
Yeah, or a badly packed kebab at the Belfry. Which,
when did that sort of?
No, but you've got to play. You've got to have the bad. You've got to play bad courses as well.
But it's
that's
almost like
thing.
you don't know what you have. When you play.
And most courses I find have some discernible quality. Like I very very few courses I think I've ever played that don't have one redeemable feature.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But I think if you
love Painswick.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's outlandish and provocative. It's not the world's greatest golf course by any stretch, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot
and
of
then
good
you've
golf.
got other places. So you know what I mean? I think I much of it is about different flavours than necessarily
engagement. For me was really, I've got the attention threshold of a gnat, so I can very quickly lose interest. And if you live in the Midlands, a lot of kids growing up dream about playing the Belfry.
That's nationwide as well, though, isn't it? People want to play
probably
the Belfry.
is, but especially. I grew up in the '80s, so
Ryder Cup
the Ryder
were
Cup,
big.
Yeah, and I went to a couple of them as a youngster, and the course never did anything for me. It just sort of waffled.
But so much of
me.
that is I've seen it on TV, and it's a generational thing, and having the British Masters there will not create that same generational pull that maybe. They were really big years in the Ryder Cup, though. They were really big years in the Ryder Cup and the Belfry, weren't they? And I think that means that whole generation of that sort of, maybe we're in our 30s. Smidge more.
Thanks. Yeah. Mid-40s.
He's already given it away.
No, but there's that whole generation then have a big pull to it because I don't wish bad fortune on the Belfry, but I suspect that might change.
I think before we get into to what we got you here for, it'd be interesting. You touched on Sam touched on Painswick. You put us onto, or certainly put me onto Painswick. I'd say you're a big champion of courses in the Cotswolds in general.
Yeah.
Do you think it's an underrepresented part of British golf?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's sort of I don't know quite how to categorise it because it's not Parkland, it's not Heathland. I think it's probably meadow golf. This is
right. That's how you call that.
It's pretty rudimentary. And to a lot of people would think it's Mickey Mouse just by looking at it.
They would, yeah.
However, there's some proper golf to be had.
Yeah.
And a lot of the designs are Victorian era. They're sort of heroic school of utterly bonkers hazards that you would just never contemplate.
David Brown put it down, didn't he, at Painswick, I think. Open champion, we're going back.
One of the Musselburgh, the five
because they picked these weird places to put the holes. So it's like that once they'd laid the greens, it was like there's bugger all you can do with the land afterwards. It's like Church Stretton's kind of like that. It's a great golf course, but once you've rooted it and dug out the greens and you've got those flat parts to play to, it's actually not a fat lot you can do to undo all of that kind of. So it becomes a time capsule, you know.
Yeah. Well, the first hole at Painswick is It's probably
ski slope.
It's probably one of the most bonkers holes you'd ever play in golf.
It's like a 220-yard par 4, and you go, this is easy, but you can't get anywhere near it.
No. And if the fairway burns off in the summer, I know some old boys,
it's coming back
the ball
at you.
will just keep coming back down to the road.
I mean, walk up to the second and start from there.
There's so many bonkers things. One of the great things is on the back nine, there's back-to-back holes. There's a par 4 that's maybe 210 yards, and then it's followed by a par 3 that's 250.
Yeah,
because one's up a hill, the other's straight down it. And you look at the card and you go, they printed this wrong. This isn't right.
It's legit.
But that's one of the many crazy things. But that sort of Victorian era of golf can be exceptional fun, as long as there's not just loads of cross hazards, of which there's not really anything left in terms of courses with those sort of full rudimentary cops bunkers I used to have. But the basic principle was of sort of heroic challenge. And if you look at
forcing them to carry, forcing them to execute, that was the examination.
And quite often there would be a safer route, but it was generally an examination of somebody's mettle. And I mean, you look at the original routing of Royal St George's, of which it's broadly the same as it is today. They would have two flags on the top of the sand dunes. There would be a safe route and a sort of tiger route, and you could take your pick. But the idea was it would be a challenge, and there was blindness, and then gradually, as people got a bit more aware of the skill, they wanted to take the chance out of it, and they flattened. So Burnham and Barrow is a really good example, which there was a huge amount of, if you look at an aerial photo of Burnham and Barrow, the original routing was in the sand dunes way more than the current
using
routing.
More of the stuff around the channel course?
No, in the middle of the course,
just
which is kind of where
the
beginning and the end of the course is in the dunes, and then you kind of go out around the really sexy land, because Colt, my understanding was Colt was pretty much brought in and told to eliminate a load of the blindness because people didn't like it.
I don't think that's like a solo thing. Like you look at, Little Aston, another wonderful golf club in the Midlands. Varden routing, which was pretty much, it was pure Victorian.
Yeah, that's a Varden route, but
that's where Colt came in, was to take out some of the Victorian penal-esque. And you can kind of see it in the routing, in so much as it's actually an out and back. It's not a 2T start, which was more of a golden age thing, correct? Or is that oversimplifying it?
I think Little Aston, as an example, was pretty much the routing that Varden did, and it was bunkered by Colt. I
think he took out some of the cross-hazarding and some of the extreme stuff that was there.
Yeah, and you can still see the remnants of it. I mean, we've got some great old... So Varden originally did 9 holes at Copteeth. It's not... We basically blew the whole thing up when Colt came in, but you can still see the remnants of the original hazards. There's quite a few holes. Some have got trees growing in them now, but they basically just let them grass over, and it's really quite cool doing that sort of time team architectural... archaeology. It's quite interesting.
So all this info that you've just reeled off for the last 20 minutes, has that all come from study? Has that come from just friends and networks you built? Has it come from actually just studying black and white aerials? Because I mean, if we made a documentary about you, it's like, when you see those documentaries on Channel 4 and it's like the guy that dresses up as a dog and eats his dinner out of the bowl on the floor, and you go, that guy is really weird.
That's on Channel 5, isn't it? Late night.
But that's kind of like where you've ended up now. You've probably got the largest collection of black and white course photography on the planet. You've got an almost inside. It's quite a weird end state.
And I would also say,
is it just started with that and the research, or have you just accumulated it? Where's all this knowledge come from?
So I've got a big book collection, which I've kind of added to over the years, but I mean, most of it is I started capturing. I think it probably started from me wanting to make change at my home club,
right?
And I saw it as I had a job to do to educate people. Back in the days when I was a bit more motivated to try and use committees to make change, which I've kind of got over, having failed miserably several times. But yeah, a lot of it was I found things interested and thought others would, and it would help educate decisions being made at the club. And And then I just started to save things in a Google Drive, and now I've got this massive archive of things that I've collected over probably 15 years, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, what's amazing about you and your collection? I mean, roughly, do you have an idea of how many images you have, roughly?
Oh, no idea. I don't know. Thousands.
Yeah, thousands. Most of them are bunkers, am I right?
Black and white, rugged bunkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically.
But what I'm absolutely astounded at is what must be the precision in the way that you've archived it. Because I know I can come to you and say,
Yeah.
Haines, I need a picture of the fifth bunker from somewhere between 1950 and 1970 on Blackwell. And you'd be like,
Do you remember the Rye
"There it
film?
is."
I was like,
And
have you
it's-
got the soup bunker? And you were like, yeah, here's 20 of the soup bunker, soup bowl
So
bunker,
the way
whatever it
that
is.
the way you've put that together must be very easily accessible because you do it quickly.
Yeah. And it's not really complicated. I just capture images, and whether I'm taking a photo of them from a book I've got, or I get them off a digital archive, newspaper archive, or I just stumble over them on the web, or postcards. I started collecting postcards for a while, and then in the end I just try and just borrow the pictures off eBay.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those cigarette things?
No, because that's a rabbit hole I didn't want to allow myself to go down.
Really?
Yeah,
Because there's loads of
Are
those.
you
aren't
a
there?
bit of a
Cigarette
complete
cards.
to finish? You'd start it and then you'd be sort of like
Yeah.
trawling eBay every night
and
for
selling
the
the house to
for
fund
the
it.
sort of myopia hunt club matchbook or whatever you need. Yeah.
So no, but there's lots of those cool little hole sketches. In fact, I was looking at one for Woking the other day for the fourth hole at Woking. They had one with the jovial golfer, and they had the tiger and the rabbit with two different lines. That's the way they used to refer to the better golfers and the sort of higher handicap man. But
Do you ever? So you've got this. I mean, like, what's quite cool. If you don't follow Simon Haines on Twitter, go and follow Simon Haines on Twitter.
At Hainesy76.
yeah,
Yeah, and what happens
Giving
invariably?
his age away
Someone
right there.
says something like, "Oh, I need this," then someone will tag you in it, and that picture will arrive within minutes.
It's like Bambercat, right?
yeah. So I mean,
Do you speak to him a bit?
Yeah, and I mean his book collection is significantly better than mine, which I think is probably the source of most of his material. But yeah, he's got an amazing collection of club histories, a lot of which in the States we can't really get it easily over here without spending an absolute fortune. But yeah, so there's a few people around the world doing this sort of thing, and it's becoming increasingly valuable to architects that are in the restoration, renovation game. So, yeah, over the years I've helped loads of people on loads of different courses. Not through any sort of financial gain, but just because I'm...
Just because you absolutely love it.
Yeah, I'm just really passionate about making sure people do the right thing with historically important courses in the same way that we have sort of protection around. We're really good in this country at protecting historic buildings and sites. I'd love to see something similar in place for
Yeah, like a protection order around certain things. Like not everything, but like
yeah.
no, but like there is certain. There's an argument. Say you could take, some of the stuff at Rye or at Brancaster or whatever, and it's like that stuff should be wrapped up. Like that should be protected because it's like you shouldn't touch that. It's like it's so significant to the, the stuff at North Berwick, whatever these things are. Like I think, and the other thing I'll say about the photographs is, I think we talked about this on another pod, Tom, when you was like, like a little bit of information is a really dangerous thing, which particularly in our line of work, which is where we get ourselves in trouble
all the time.
But there is, right? Like you can go off and sit in front of a committee meeting, and anyone could construe a different style of bunkering and attribute it to Colt and say, well, this is absolutely what we need to do. And it's like, well, actually, here's some hard empirical data.
Well, you can see how these things happen as well. So. Much as the newspaper archives are great, and a lot of it's digitised now, the reporting accuracy at the time was pretty ropey. So,
was it?
Yeah, you'd often see mislabeled photographs, and it was the same news story that would go out through various different publications, and it wasn't always accurate. And then, the majority of historic golf clubs seems like they've suffered at least one clubhouse fire.
Yeah. Do you reckon there was an arsonist at play?
Just going round to make.
I don't find the same with like.
It's the post Golden Age architects who just going around and burning it.
Seriously, like every club burned down.
Yeah, it certainly it's caused.
Formby's one of the oldest in England. I mean, it's really like the old great club, isn't it? 1886 or something. It's like
That's really a pod in itself. The clubhouses that are burned down. Yeah.
Like it's a ranking of top.
There's so many. There's so many of them.
Fires.
I mean, famously, St George's Hill. That wonderful clubhouse now originally had a
thatched roofs were never
roof.
a good move.
It's not a good move when everybody's smoking in every room in the clubhouse. But but so you go into the club archives, and quite often these clubs now have not got anything.
Yeah.
So they would have been completely lost. Or, I mean, I've spent dozens of hours at my home club going through cupboards and attic space, trying to find, assuming there is this massive cache somewhere of old photos, and there's literally nothing at all. So I don't know where it's gone, but you can see how history can rewrite itself quite easily.
Interestingly, we spent a bit of time down at St George's Hill, and it probably is something that we're hopefully looking to do in a future podcast, is do something about St George's Hill. But we met up with Jasper Miners, who's been appointed as one of the sort of consulting.
I think they've been working there this week.
They've been working there.
It's like a collab thing, isn't it? With
Jasper literally was covered in cobwebs. He came down with like all this stuff. And he's like, I've been in the attic. I've just been. And he'd found all these minute books. From,
he smelled like your nan's wardrobe. You know, that sort of like that smell of something that's been there for like 100 years.
In the attic and all sorts of stuff. And
I
mean, it's amazing what's up in these.
And what he was saying as well about, like, because St George's Hill, of course, is one that really does jump off and it hits you in the mouth hard. Like, it's really bold, provocative stuff. And he was like, well, actually, we think there's good evidence here that St George's Hill was the course that he took to Pine Valley when he worked with Crump a little bit.
It was the same time.
Yeah, and he was like, this is the sort of stuff. Like, this is a sort of blueprint of what I think we should be building.
Yeah, but I think what's also interesting, going through the Copteith Club archives, the committee minute books are pretty much all we've got left. And you get a real sense, if you look at the description of workmen on site and the bills being paid out to the construction crew, it made you realise that actually, although Colt was there relatively frequently, it's not like the design build guys that we have today. He was entrusting a lot of his work on the ground to be done by, in the case of Copteith and a lot of his other sort of big designs, it was by the Franks Harris brothers company.
Morrison, big construction guy?
He
like sort of architect in his own right? He was an
architect, a sort of well-to-do good golfer. But the man on the ground on so many of the projects who was deciding where the bunkers, the final position of the bunkers, the final shaping of the bunkers was Claude Harris, who was a construction guy, he's an engineer really, a bit like Seth Rayner to C.B. McDonald's sort of that relationship in the States. But you don't read about him.
No.
I mean, and that's where, if you look at...
It gets oversimplified as, it's a Colt.
It's a Colt.
Which is strange.
And it's like, well, no, so you would look at it and go, well, this was Harris bunkering, and I know that's not been touched because that was what he built.
Colt is the one, you hear so much. As I'd still consider myself a layman in all things architecture, but you still hear about Colt bunkering.
You are.
Like, Colt bunkering is revered.
There's loads of different styles of Colt bunkering throughout, and it changed multiple times throughout his, 30-odd years building courses. But a lot of it would have definitely been to do with the guys on the ground. And, I mean...
Can you spot that stuff? Have you got an eye for where you can be like...
You can definitely see where something's been built well. And you can tell that something's been changed. So it's pretty obvious, and especially you can tell when Franks Harris have been involved because it's generally really good.
Right. What would be an example standout bunker of Colts? Put you on the spot, give you a couple of your all-time great bunkers, so that if someone's out playing that course, they could be like, I see what he means there.
So, I'll be parochial for a second and talk about Copteith. We got a 14th bunker, it's a short par 4 with a huge fronting bunker. And it's built
Play
up.
up to the raised green.
Yeah, the green's
great
been
golf hole.
raised up from the sort of lay of the land. Bunkers cut into banks. The bunkers are layered. Originally, there would have been sort of half a dozen bunkers short of the green as well, going off the tee all the way up to the green. So it would have looked like a sea of sand, which is something you really get at Pine Valley as well, with the hazards layer.
Tiers
You
and,
can't really get a sense of distance or anything to aim at. But yeah, it's a really good. It's a big, bold bunker, and Copteeth is a pretty flat piece of land. There's not much.
Is it 11 as well? There's another huge cross bunkering 11 there, isn't there?
And generally, what you would see is if there was a change in the terrain, Colt would cut a bunker into the bank, and you'd quite often hear him. Well, he would describe it on his plans as tear bunker from slope.
He's basically pulling the earth away.
Literally just scraping the earth.
Yeah.
So he wasn't having to build up. Because the other thing...
Whereas Mackenzie sort of shaped them up. Like, you go and play all woodland, it's almost like the faces are lifted up in the air. It's almost like there's been earth moved around the bunker to create the face.
Yeah, and
rather than pulling it off the turf.
He was generally quite a bit more intricate with some of his shapes as well.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I always find interesting when you go to these old Golden Age courses. You can always see how they built, because it's there in front of you. There would be a borrow pit not far from the green, because they weren't able to transport earth around. And then if you see something built up, it's like, well, where have they got the earth from? So
you look at it, you'll generally find a depression in the natural landscape somewhere where it's like, they borrowed a bit of earth because they need to build up something. You know?
Yeah. So, and they're quite often, obviously, they were the bunkers. So, but yeah, if you look at a big push-up green that's above the grade, they would have borrowed it from somewhere nearby. So, just a real geeky activity for you to.
No, this is great. No, but that's like really good.
Pits. But another example of, one that screams out to me when you talk about the bunker, and you're going to tell me it's not an original hole now, and I'm going to be really direct, is the fourth at St George's Hill. And I'm talking about that a lot. But one of those, again, short par fours that similarly to the Copteeth one you just described is like, for all the world should be a fairly straightforward golf hole. Yeah. But just invites you to make a twat of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tempting enough, isn't it? Beautiful V-shaped green, and it's that difficult distance that.
And the green's
sort of
so
half
intricate, it's got that wavy nature to the green.
Yeah, and that's how a good short par 4 should be. You kind of work your way back from the green to the tee, and you always want a challenging green. So you need to think about where your tee shot goes.
Here's first of all, we're 33 minutes into the podcast.
We haven't got to the body of the pod, but that's fine, because this is going to be a big pod, and there's going to be a lot of really good stuff here. We've just got to tease it out.
Are there any cult courses that have been truly bastardized?
Yeah, I want to know which is, like, there's got to be some sort of crimes against humanity here. Like, there's got to be a rank in your head of, like, that's almost like Hague war crimes territory here, what they did to X, Y, and Z, without being too disparaging, of course, which I know you wouldn't be.
Yeah, there's loads. Unfortunately, there's loads.
Is there?
Yeah.
Is it rarer to find one that's just like
untouched?
Yeah, generally clubs that don't have any money and have historically never had any money have never had the temptation to spend it.
Yeah.
And tinker.
It's almost like the Addington. Moira Fabes was the best thing that ever happened to the Addington.
Yeah.
Because she just never bothered to do anything with it.
Neglect has been the best.
Neglect is the best thing for it. Because as Jasper said in the pod, the very early days with us, it's right where it needs to be world class again.
Yeah. A really good example of a Mackenzie course in a similar boat is Cavendish, the Cavendish. Up
I'm
in
yet
Buxton,
to play that. Meant to be so good.
It's an incredible place. So it was a fairly late on Mackenzie design before he went off on his travels, and my understanding is they've never had a load of spare cash around to make a load of changes. Thankfully, it hasn't got too much damaging sort of tree growth on it. It's now got a knowledgeable membership that is aware of their history, and as a consequence, they've got this wonderful time capsule of a Mackenzie design, pretty much all original greens, and it's a wonderful place. I'd highly recommend going.
Would it be fair to say Wentworth would fit into the category of what Tom's describing? The West would be. But that'd be a stretch away from what Colt left. You think 100 years ago?
Well, so that's a difficult one, because that was Colt and Morrison, and it was, they were basically given a bit of a brief to design a Burley Championship course.
Right.
So it's always been there.
So it's always been a big...
It's always been a big brief.
Yeah.
The East was the sort of and
Not the ladies' course, but it was always a shorter course.
and
Because St George's Hill had a shorter second course. It's now the Green Nine.
But I mean, the East is a wonderful course. It's ripe for
Everyone says they love the East.
It's ripe for a really thoughtful restoration, which I fear they'll probably struggle to get. But really interesting at Wentworth is this, there's a few things that I would love to find out more about that I've never, through all my digging, never been able to find. But the Wentworth had a third course.
What?
Really?
And given how much was written about Wentworth back in the day, I haven't been able to find anything other than a photo of the 18th green, which was shaped like the British Isles.
Really?
So
What? In water or in sand?
no, so the surrounding coastline would be bunker. So you could have a pin position in Devon. Pin position in Cornwall would be
Tucked.
really
Yeah,
hard.
really tucked.
But yeah,
Get
Devon,
into the Midlands where it's soft and heavy ground as well. That's a
middle of the green.
It's a real sort of
You
Thursday
could
pin. That
tuck one away in North Wales. But in this photo, and it obviously doesn't work talking about it as well as showing you the photo. But
Have you got it? I'd love to share that.
Yeah.
We'll put some
We'll
show
put it on
notes
social
together.
media, yeah.
Also on our website with this pod, we'll put a few show notes together with some of the stuff because you're going to talk us through some
But
photos.
this is the
as
most
well.
incredible looking green, and there's obviously a course that went with it, and I can't find anything about it.
Wow.
So
Isn't that strange?
yeah, and I've got the Wentworth Club history. There's no mention of it at all. Now there is a third course there now with the Edinburgh, but that I would assume would use some of the land that would have had that original course on. But yeah, anyone who's listening,
Nothing from the old RF. Nothing.
no, nothing that
Gone
I've
by
been
then.
able to find. So I don't know. I suspect it was like a lot of these projects were built just before the Second World War. Then they were put to plough or just left and never reinstated.
Wow.
Because there's a cult course not far from here that was built. It was one of Colt's last designs actually at Chadwick Manor,
Okay.
which is just outside of the village I live in, and that was built in 36 to 38, opened for a year, then the war started, and it went bump. It was attached to a luxury hotel, and never reinstated, but the course is still there. So I've got the plans. I drove up the driveway to this.
Wow.
The old Country House Hotel is now a residential block of apartments. But the house is still a lovely old house. And you go up the driveway to it, and you can actually see it's the 12th hole, according to the plan I've got. You can see it. You can see the green pad. So yeah,
amazing.
I do have dreams of.
We're going to
winning
get
the
on to
lottery.
the historical faux pas soon, I'm sure. But what's the best? What's the one course that you're never going to be able to play? And I don't want you to start reeling off courses that are hard to get on. By that I mean the courses that no longer exist or exist in the form that you wanted to play them.
I've been increasingly falling in love with the Addington over the last
The new.
few. So the course that we play today is the old, but the one that doesn't exist anymore is under a housing estate was the new course at the Addington, which is Abercrombie's second course, and the photos I see of that are just spectacular, and the writings of the day described it as its equal, if not better, than the old course.
Where was the new in situation to where the old is now?
Over the road, isn't
Over
it?
the road.
From where the clubhouse is.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the clubhouse was originally
Down
planned
the hill?
so the clubhouse was originally planned to be up on the top where Ryan's looking at relocating it now. And then I think that clubhouse, the current clubhouse position, would have been sort of in between
Okay.
the two courses.
And it's now residential, is it? Or?
Yeah, so there's some good RAF aerials where you can see in just after the Second World War these basically prefab houses built on residential streets down the fairway corridors.
Really?
So you can literally see the back gardens would have been fairway. But yeah, that's
So
a
that
sad,
one would
sad
be
loss.
up there.
I think that would be up there. There's not many
Does
great.
Lido stuff's a bit overdone, or do you think that would be?
I
I think that's a real lost gem to the world of course architecture.
absolutely. And I mean, it was as much as anything, an incredible feat of engineering back in the day, because it was built from basically reclaimed land, just by
lowlands, isn't it? Almost sort of
pumping, sand. So the construction photos of the Lido are amazing.
What do you mean? So they were literally like firing sand in to create a sort of a draining
dredging,
like
dredging and pumping sand to build the land up above the sort of swampy marsh. So there was nothing there. So everything was built up, which is probably one of the reasons they've been able to recreate it pretty well, because it was generally pretty flat terrain. It's not like you're trying to recreate Augusta.
Well, we're in good story mode. I feel like we've sort of broken some of the journey in here. Now we should introduce which is the main reason. Like we thought about doing a pod with you on Victorian architecture as well, but that never happened. And it was like we speak so often, but we pod never. It was like, what's the topic? And it felt like the right topic would be historical faux pas. Well, why?
I feel like I should probably bowl into this one. So.
This was all quite exciting when the Netherlands series was starting to be released.
So
we could glam this up as being like an intelligent decision, seeing who could spot it. But the reality
it's
is
serendipity. It's finest, really. So, for those listeners of the podcast that haven't been over to watch our films from the Netherlands, what
are you doing?
We made it.
What the bloody hell have you been doing?
We get about 1p a download. So just go and click refresh as much as you can, please. We made a series in the Netherlands based on Colt's trip to the Netherlands and his trip around many different, Colt and Allison's trip around the Netherlands and the many places he visited and the wonderful courses that he left behind. We did that trip back in October last year with the intention of making a film series, which we did. We did 5 courses worth of filming. It basically took up most of my 2022 and early 2023. I designed and edited what I thought were a masterpiece in videography to then release the first one, hoping,
It was all quite exciting, wasn't it? It was like Netherlands series is starting, rub your hands together, got wife in,
the thing
son
is,
Charlie along, put it on the TV, let's watch this. Quite happy with our work. Thought that,
any creative,
put Eindhoven on the map, episode
anyone
1.
who works in... I recently listened to a podcast with Seth Rogen, actually, and he was talking about when he releases a film. He says when he releases a film that he's involved in, he said the first 3 days is the most anxiety he ever has, because every time you release something, you're just up to get shot down. Yeah. And I have the same thing. So we released this film, and I was like, I'm really pleased with this. I really like this film. It's really good. Sam had done some really good investigative journalism and found out about the Phillips family and the links they had with Eindhoven and Chagolf. Kees Collart, who hosted us, did a wonderful explanation. It was all fabulous. And it released on the premiere, went out on day 1, to which I then received a WhatsApp from Simon Haines. Said, loved the film, Tom. Absolutely loved it. When you put the picture of Harry Colt up, any reason it was a picture of Harry Varden? And I said, you are absolutely fucking kidding me.
But it gets worse, because you were abroad on holiday. And I got the same text from you as well, which is the first. And to be fair, I think only until recently there was only 3 people in the world that spotted it.
I wouldn't worry too much about it.
The 4th had come in fairly recently. And this opened this WhatsApp from you, and it was an image of Varden just going, Barry Colt, ? Yeah. And I was like, oh shit. So I'm thinking, how am I going to edit these films? Because we've got to release Japan on Tuesday and so on and so forth. And you're away for like 3 weeks.
Pre-made them, yeah. So
they're all up and scheduled.
Yeah.
So that image of Colt, which, to be fair, I think in your innocence you'd scrape from the internet on a quick Google search.
I think we should.
Gave us this idea, right?
We should hand over to Haynes.
Yeah. So it's worth for the listeners to understand what the challenges of trying to get historically accurate photos. Just Google HS Colt and look at images, because there are a lot of pictures of people.
CB McDonald comes up a lot, doesn't he?
Well, so there was a really good. So I went and played Blackmore.
Hodgkin.
I went and played Blackmore Golf Club, which is a lovely Colt design down in sort of North Hampshire area, down the south of the UK, and they've got plastered all over their website. In fact, it's all over the club in all their marketing literature, Harry Colt masterpiece. And on their website, under this section, Harry Colt masterpiece, they had a picture of Charles Blair Macdonald. Which
the thing is, you shouldn't laugh because these things happen with innocence. We're not laughing at the people who made the mistakes.
To know?
But
exactly,
it just happens
on Google.
Right?
That is somebody's put that on there at some point, and then it's forever the truth. And
in the Valley of the Blind, the one-eyed man is king, right?
Yeah, and then you people think, well, Blackmore must know what they're talking about, so. I felt compelled to send them an email with a whole raft of Colt photos, because actually there's not that many photos of Colt.
No, there are.
You think you've got about 12, don't you?
Yeah, probably around that.
There aren't many.
There's not many.
A lot of them are out of
you've got
focus
millions of
or
pictures
obscured.
of everything.
Yeah.
So.
And some of them he's very young, so like there's one where he's mega young and it bears almost no resemblance to the
he was a good
to the
golfer.
wily man with the tash that you see now.
So you'd see him quite a lot of the time playing in amateur events. So pre his architecture days, but there's not many of him as an architect. But yeah, it's a very common mistake to make. I mean, one of my favourite ones is I won't.
Are these your list? By the way, are we going? Because we asked you to
I can
prepare
go through a few of them.
No. But this one you're talking about now doesn't matter if it is or not. The one, finish off the one you're talking about. But are you burning your list? Because what we asked for you was a list of historical
so
faux pas.
the Blackmore one is the most recent one. My favourite one, and this is multifaceted. So there's a company that does portraits.
Yeah,
this is why I'm wrong, isn't it?
So yeah, they do portraits for golf clubs, and you can commission a portrait of a famous member or somebody in the club's history to hang above the mantle in the club bar. And they quite a few years ago posted
so good
for a commission for Betchworth Park, a Colt course that was celebrating their centenary, and a prominent member had funded this portrait of Stafford Vere Hodgkin, the founder and owner of Woodhall Spa.
Of Woodhall Spa and West Sussex.
And I remember thinking at the time, that's definitely not Harry Colt. I was sort of searching for Colt stuff, and it's like, that's not Harry Colt. That's definitely not Harry Colt. And then I was at Woodhall Spa within a couple of months, and that very picture that they used to do the portrait from actually hangs above the bar in Woodhall Spa Golf Club.
Haven't Wentworth got one as well?
So this company that does these commissions, they've then jokingly put on their website, this was nothing to do with us, it was provided by the club, and we just in good faith painted it thinking it was Harry Colt. So it's good to laugh about now. However, we have done some Harry Colt commissions before, and this one hangs in the clubhouse of Wentworth. And it's Harry Varden.
It's the picture I used, isn't it?
It's the picture you used. It's Harry Varden. So anyone visiting Wentworth Golf Club, the home of two of Colt's most famous courses, will see a picture of Harry Varden. So you can see how... You can see the challenges that you were facing by using Google to try and find historic facts.
So funny.
Yeah.
The thing is, once it's there, like in 30 years' time, someone will walk past, and then that has now become an image of that person.
We've added to that. So if someone only watches,
if you
so
watch that Eindhoven comment, we should actually use this to drive some YouTube engagement. If every listener can go to the YouTube Eindhoven film and just comment that image is of Varden, not Colt.
Yeah.
But that will send the YouTube algorithm wild as well. That'll do wonders for our subscriber rate.
Going like off topic a little bit. How do you get to a state of knowledge where you can definitively say,
yeah, because you could be in the minority now.
Because you've never seen Harry Varden.
No, but there's loads of pictures of Harry Varden.
How do you know they're real?
Well, true. But
all we're looking for is majority.
Could we hypothesise that Colt and Varden were the same person?
There's potential in that. Yeah, it's like when...
Didn't you say that?
Alice
I think
Mc-
I said that to you, and you were like, "Didn't he fall out of love with his Victorian age design business?"
Yeah.
and the advent of the technology, and thought, "Well, I'm actually going to now reinvent myself as a strategic architect or something."
Well, he was an architect in his own right, Varden, building lots of courses. But no, but it is a tough thing to do. Even historians tie themselves in knots. So another anyone who's been to Musselburgh, the Musselburgh Old Course Clubhouse has a...
They've got the 5 images, the heads.
So, yeah, and the five images of the 5 Musselburgh-based golfers that have won the Open.
So you've got the...
Pump another film.
Wait a minute.
There's another... Yeah, we've got to get...
So
it's not all about you.
Is this another historically inaccurate film?
Well, no, it's not. It's a video...
It's about to be.
There's a video clip of the headstone. Oh, hang on. So let me see if I can get this before we get it. So there's a... Do you know the shot of the clubhouse? There's the 5 heads. I think they're bookended with the parks. The first being...
Willie Park Jr., Willie Park Senior, and then there's Mungo Park.
Willie Park
David
Senior
Brown.
being the first, and Mungo
You've
being the
lost me on number
last.
5.
David Brown's
David Brown.
number 4.
Yeah.
He's the roofer. Junior, and I think Junior won 2 there, maybe.
Bob Ferguson was the other.
Okay.
However, the Mungo...
That's still not bad.
Mungo Park Senior...
What do you mean Mungo Park? Oh, because there's Mungo Park Junior.
Well, so the
clubhouse designer.
The Park family is very big. So Mungo Park Senior won the 1874 Open. Can't remember where. Probably Musselburgh Prestwick. Probably. But
Mungo Park
Senior. However, the image on that stone carving above the clubhouse is actually Mungo Park Jr., his nephew.
Is that true?
It's true. He wasn't born in 1874. Yeah.
So is that on your list, or have you just pulled that off the top of your head?
No, that's on my list.
That's on my list. I've got to fact check.
So
yeah.
How do you know that's wrong?
Because I read it in a brilliant article in the British Golf Collectors magazine, Through the Green.
Oh, they are good, aren't they?
So it's not my research, but yeah, I mean, it's...
Bloody is Mungo Park won in 1874.
Which course?
By 2 strokes, runner-up Tom Morris Jr.
I would say it's a Musselburgh. Yeah.
Yeah. That might have been young
So the bloke
Tom's last one before he died.
So Mungo... died 1904, born 1836, but his nephew Mungo Park Jr. wasn't even born in 1874, and he's the bust that they've based that stone carving on that you can see on the clubhouse.
One of the most famous sons in Musselburgh, and they got the wrong picture.
So good. So that's in your list of how many you got to take us through.
Yeah, that's in my list. So another
so good.
Another good one, and again keeping with the architecture link. So there's lots of photos of Alistair Mackenzie. As you said, he was a good salesman and liked to be photographed. There's photos of him at lots of events. Famously, actually, with the spring meeting coming up at Moortown, there's a photo of him chatting to Walter Hagen at Moortown when the Ryder Cup was held there.
Of course, that was the first time on British soil.
First
Ryder Cup on British soil at Moortown.
Yeah, it was 1929.
That anniversary was recently, wasn't it?
Was it 29?
Not if it's 29. No.
But but it was. They still have an anniversary.
Yeah.
But it happened like not that long, like a few weeks ago. That it would have been the date they played it.
Oh yeah, sorry. The time in the year, not the year.
Not to be a big anniversary.
Yeah, they didn't. Hagen wasn't there a couple of weeks ago. That's a massive faux pas.
He's certainly not.
So there's quite a well circulated image of Alistair Mackenzie sitting down.
We'll put this in the show notes.
Drinking a beer with a gentleman with round rim spectacles. And a moustache. And that photo has been circulated as Alistair Mackenzie and Donald Ross. And it's not, it's just some poor unsuspecting guy with round glasses being accused of the two
being the father of
seminal American golf architects. Yeah, so there are so many of these examples. So it's a minefield, and it doesn't help when, as I say, you go through stuff and photos are mislabeled.
So that image, because I know the one they're all sat there. people are obsessed. That's Mackenzie and Donald Ross.
Yeah, it's not.
Meeting of great minds, dividing the world up amongst themselves.
No.
You take the Carolinas, I'll go to the West Coast. That's
and this
the
was
discussion.
in California, and the date it would have been.
But it's
Donald
at
Ross
Moortown.
It was still in Dornoch.
this was in California, but it's been proven. Yeah, definitely, it wasn't logistically possible to be Donald Ross. But
Superb.
Is there any mechanism, like, short of like just emailing everybody, is there any mechanism to like correct any of these factual inaccuracies?
Well, this is why Twitter's just full of screaming angry people, because you've got a very small percentage of the world that is filled with people of knowledge and competence, and lots of people who have a very small amount of truth. So then you end up with these people who are keyboard warriors, and you could be. I don't think you are a keyboard warrior. You don't behave like that. But it must be hard.
Self generally,
But it must be hard not to be a keyboard warrior. Jokes aside, to not be like, stop getting history wrong. Like, no, that's just some bloke with round rim specs. That's not Ross. Like, please. But like,
just wearing glasses.
No, like,
that's it.
I know there is a fine line, and no one's like. I hate it when people are just policing it on Twitter, because it's like it's a bit of a killjoy, and it's like great. But at the same rate, the temptation must be huge.
Yeah, and I generally hold back from stuff because it can get a bit septic, can't it, on Twitter? But yeah, it is frustrating because it can send you off down some pretty sort of dead ends as well. So I collect golf club histories amongst my book collection. I've got one for Broadway Golf Club, which is again a Cotswold
Who
golf
designed
course.
that?
Well, if you read their club history, they believe Alistair Mackenzie.
Right. Okay.
Which
But I don't know. I played a bit of junior golf there. Stunning place to play golf.
So
Lovely golf course.
Well, it sent me off down a pretty deep research pit, and in the end, I ended up reaching out to the Mackenzie chronology guys, who are like a pretty impressive group of golf historians.
Simon Haines at Cop2 spending weeks on this now.
Yeah, I was like, did you know?
It's just an itch that needed to be scratched.
Yeah, Mackenzie has been spotted at Broadway, and they're like, yeah, it's not physically possible. It must have been.
Well,
he was having a
here
holiday
we go.
in California at
You're
that time.
probably the most knowledgeable person on this topic that we've had on the podcast.
But how do you
then.
disprove that? Sorry,
But-
how can you disprove
Well, because
that?
His
they've
wasn't-
got
it's
the chronology, and
They know exactly where he was
Yeah.
month by month.
yeah, it's really impressive, honestly. For
So they can go like,
Pretty much
well,
all
when
of
did
his
he lay it
career.
out? Okay, well, yeah, September 26th. Like, no chance. He
they've
was in Melbourne
they've got
then.
invoices, they've got correspondence, they've got newspaper articles, and they've pieced it all together for pretty
That's
much
unbelievable.
Yeah, so the Mackenzie chronology is downloadable on the web. It's an amazing resource. They update it. I don't know what version they're on now, but it's updated all the time. But
Well, here's an interesting one. Again, probably shouldn't say it, but fuck it, we're there now, aren't we?
Oh, God.
When we made the film about Cleve Hill, the original film about Cleve Hill, when it was closing, there was some information out there. We are by no means experts. We had heard it was an old Tom course, and we'd heard that had input from Alistair Mackenzie. Now, after we posted it, we had, I would say, a fair amount of people say 1 is not true and 2 is not true.
Oh, the old Tom is for sure.
But Dave,
There's a
some
witness
David
there.
Brown stuff in there.
see,
Now,
yeah,
So the outcome was good, because I don't know whether there's anything to do with us, but the outcome was that Cleve Hill was saved. Brilliant.
Yeah,
would it
amazing.
make it? Would it make it any less right to talk about it? Did it help? Yes.
But I don't know. I can't say.
Did
if
we
it's for
use it in
true.
knowledge that it wasn't
The
right? I
research-
don't know. Yeah.
The research that
Well,
we did.
you made the film in 2 days straight from when we visited the club. I mean, it was like
the research that we did led,
and
led
it
us to
did an
we
believe.
didn't have a
amazing
team
job
of 50
some of those
researchers
things.
working around the clock on
What-
that to make sure that everything was
You're
substantiated.
fairly well versed on Cotswolds golf.
So if I was a betting man, it would have probably been most of the stuff that you see there now would have been David Brown.
Yeah, David Brown was involved there, wasn't he? 'Cause he was the club pro for a bit there.
Well, so he was a pro at Cotswold Hills, I think, in Cheltenham, and I believe there is a story about David Brown.
Didn't he teach
teaching
Victoria
Queen
to
Victoria
play? Yeah.
to play golf as
And
well.
then he
so
died penniless in the 30s
In the
after the Great
poorhouse.
Depression, which is a
Yeah.
real shame, really.
I actually played with. I would
Him
have been
and
at-
Marion Hollins, 2 tragic deaths in the game.
Yeah, I ended up playing at Renaissance Golf Club quite a
That's
few
a
years
cult
ago.
as well, isn't it?
It's it's Barry, it's a Tom Doak designer next to North Berwick and Muirfield, and
it was a joke, just for our listeners' benefit. Just
Yeah.
before that sarcasm. I know there's parts of the world where sarcasm doesn't translate that well. That was a joke. Just want to be super clear on that. Please continue, Simon.
But my caddy when I played it would have been the great grandson of David Brown.
Really?
So we were just chewing the fat about golf and golf history, and he said, I'm related to an Open champion.
That's unbelievable.
And he said, David Brown, you'd never have heard of him. So
Sorry,
actually,
yeah.
I have heard of him. I don't believe
There's
it.
25 images
Yeah,
of him.
here you go.
Yeah, I've seen Simon Painsbury lived on
And-
54 so-and-so
and
Street in
Yeah, it was
Cirencester.
pretty cool historic link because
Great
got-
roofer.
yeah.
Great roofer.
He
So
was a good roofer, yeah.
yeah.
Didn't have a coat or a hat.
Yeah,
Never
but
washed his work clothes.
Yeah, but you certainly can't say Cleef Hill was a collaboration between Mackenzie and
No.
old Tom.
But was there old Tom and was there Mackenzie input at some point? Who knows?
Potentially. And I mean, the other thing with Mackenzie is his brother ran the golf course construction company that built a lot of his courses over in this country.
Mackenzie's.
So most of Mackenzie's courses were built by his brother, Charles Mackenzie. So he was kind of doing the same thing that Franks Harris were for Colt. And he became an architect in his own right. So,
Did it?
Fulford up in York, for example,
Is a quote-unquote Mackenzie course.
it's a Mackenzie. It's just the other Mackenzie. Yeah. So yeah, they could advertise it and just not use the initial. But yeah, so Charles Mackenzie, and he was building golf courses all over. So they could have had in some dodgily kept club minutes, meeting minutes, the mention of Mackenzie, and it could have been him, or it could have been some other guy.
It's so sketchy. I remember the early days, and we're not plugging our films all this pod, and we don't do this usually. I know you're an avid listener, Simon.
Yeah.
And an avid corrector of the mistakes we make.
But I think it's just
But like, do you remember Formby Ladies
made?
when they were like, "Oh, it's really hard to prove, but we can see there was some invoice between the Formby Ladies Club and Colt, but we can't actually really prove exactly what was happened,
Well,
other
they
than
had
the fact that there was
they
X
had a-
shillings exchanged for
Yeah.
some level of dialogue, but there wasn't a huge amount more than that."
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, then you're in that murky grey territory that, let's be honest, most golf club minutes are probably
especially
in.
if it's burned down.
Yeah.
But also,
Yeah.
usually the safest sort of lines to follow are invoices, because the financial records tend to be the ones that linger the longest. I don't know why.
Yeah, but also the impact of some of these visits. If it was literally a visit, so when Colts basically signed off All Woodley, he was just brought in.
How much truth is there around that? Do you think that's pretty well?
That's
fair?
well documented. I mean,
Mackenzie designed, Colt came up, checked his work.
Mackenzie talks about it in the Spirit of St Andrews. So it's clearly documented. So basically, it was Mackenzie's design, and he was having an argument with the committee about who was whether his design was fit for purpose. They got Colt to come in just to rubber stamp it, and Colt said, "Yeah, it's all good."
Let him crack
But
on.
when you hear about Woodley being a Mackenzie and Colt, it's not Colt at all. He
No,
just
no,
said,
Colt just said it's fine.
yes, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
You're not going to waste your money with this
Yeah.
with this guy. But again, you don't have to look far to see or Woodley have a Colt mention against it. And again, I mean, even Colt's involvement at Pine Valley. Yes,
That's open to a lot of debate, because some people say Allison, don't they? And they say...
Well, no, Allison went back in the 20s, but the reality is Pine Valley was built by numerous people.
Yeah, it was every man and his dog.
so Crump-
Can we
Yeah.
just cover the history of... Because there's a whole fascinating bit of dialogue that we've never really covered on this. It's one of the accidents that happens in a bar on a Sunday night in Britain. No apologies necessary.
No, it adds to the
Good
ambience.
theatre, yeah. We've never really covered some of the chronology of events around the development of Pine Valley, mainly because I don't think we know them well enough.
We've never been.
No, but there's a whole thing around Crump and what happened there. So
Yeah.
just run us through the evolution of that and why Pine Valley as a course and club is so storied.
Yes, I think he got the land. Crump bought the land. So he's a hotelier in Philadelphia. Bought the land probably 1912-ish, I think, and sold everything he owned and lived on the property
Did he? Cashed all his chips in for this?
As far as I'm aware,
and he
yeah.
hadn't designed anything before. He's part of that
No, but
Philadelphia School of Friends.
Yeah, so
was it
these-
with Tillinghast and those guys?
Yeah, so these guys would get the train from Philadelphia to play some winter golf in Atlantic City, I think it is, out on the coast. And yeah, there's Tillinghast and a bunch of these other guys, very knowledgeable, well, sort of high golf IQ guys. And the train track went straight past Pine Valley and bought the land. But then he died. Well, committed suicide.
Killed himself, right?
Before it was finished. So I think there was maybe 14 holes.
Was that money worries?
Was
it hard to read between what's happened?
I'm not entirely sure on the history. I'd have to refer to.
But it was a problem
one
he
of the
couldn't
books.
fix was the 18-hole routing. Right? Couldn't get
Yeah,
he
and-
couldn't get it back or something. Or?
Well, so the sort of famous piece of the jigsaw that Colt aided was the fifth, the famous long par 3 over the
water,
over the pond, and it's one of the great long par 3s, if not the greatest. Although there'll be some debate with Ryan about the 13th
tree
at the
clearance
Addington
and stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, and then after that, there's a whole bunch of people that helped finish it, and they brought Allison back in the 20s. And in fact, I've been lucky enough to visit Pine Valley, and in one of the lodges there, they've got his Allison's report from the 20s about changes to be made that you can see.
Did he just zhuzh it up a bit then?
Yeah, and then it has changed over the years as well, not least because it's now a load of trees which weren't really there if you look at the original photos. It looked much more like Sunningdale looked again back in the day. In fact, you look at the old pictures of Sunningdale and Pine Valley when it was pretty open expanse, and they look incredibly similar.
Really?
So you can see why Colt would have been feeling quite comfortable making recommendations on that land. But
I think that's a fairly common thing, isn't it? Like, we were looking at some of the images of Eindhoven when we were down there, and when Eindhoven, you look at it now, and certainly from some of the high aerials that we took, it's like it is a dense forest.
yeah,
And there's nothing there. And it's weird that you think that, some of these places kind of become, I don't know, like synonymous. Like they've been carved out of the woodland.
yeah.
But that was never the way it was.
I definitely think if you're an alien that landed on this planet and you took all your information from golf Twitter, what you would glean from that is that trees are pretty much like a 1960s post thing. There was like an epidemic of trees that happened to the earth, because you don't see any recorded trees on golf courses before the 50s.
Yeah.
Did they just level them all before construction and go, we're just going to clear all this out?
Yeah, so a lot of the land that they played golf on
Or did they not have them before?
Well, it would have been common land or unenclosed land, even, like, forget the links land, but the inland stuff as they moved to the heaths. But that would have been maintained, I'm sure, by grazing cattle.
Yeah.
So you would have kept tree growth down just naturally through the grazing animals, and as soon as they take the animals off, it pretty quickly loses control. And I've got some great old pictures of the 10th at Sunningdale Old, which is the sort of the famous elevated tee with the halfway house down behind the green. And yeah, it's just wide open. There's hardly any trees anyway. And if you play it now, you'd think it's just been carved through a forest. And there's lots of Sunningdale like that. There was open, expansive views across the common to Wentworth. You would have been able to see. You would have been able to see from Sunningdale across to Wentworth. Yeah. So the back end of Wentworth, sort of 9 and 10 on the west course, you would have been able to see across the common. Probably more from the Sunningdale New, I would guess. But yeah.
Yeah, because when you play new and you get around to about, is it 8 or something, you get out to that far end where they had the forest fire, and it's like, yeah, you're quite close.
So that forest fire was the forest fire that was burning in that Rose Series event at
right,
Wentworth, if you remember, just behind the 10th tee and the West Course. Yeah.
We found out recently, this is going kind of wildly off, we need to get back on the faux pas.
Yeah, because they were elite.
Obviously, with Sunningdale, they are known for being Willie Park Jr. and Harry Colt. But that Willie Park Jr. being the old and Harry Colt being the new. But I found out recently that Harry Colt did quite an extensive amount of work.
Massive amount on the old. Yeah.
But again, it's oversimplified, isn't it? It's a class example of, the context is probably buried in the nuance of him being a secretary and honing his
tinkered
craft there and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, he would have tinkered for quite a few years. And if you see the original photos of the old, when Park did it, because he was at Hunter
Again, it's Victorian stuff,
Hunter
isn't it?
Coombe at the same time. Yeah, there was square greens at Sunningdale Old. So for those of you that know the 12th hole at Sunningdale, it's a famous uphill par 4. Second shot plays uphill
left
into a benched green.
Yeah.
In the hill with a beautiful sort of diagonal of bunkers short of the green, and the original green on the Park course was down low on the right hand side. Colt moved it back 50 yards and put it up into the bank. This
transforms the golf hole.
Completely transforms it. And then the 13th hole, which is now, you then walk to the top of the hill, and it's a drop par 3. Park's routing had that played down by the greenkeeper sheds on the right, and it was a blind short par 4. You played over a mound to a square green. I mean, it's not even slightly
different golf hole.
Completely different.
But that's the thing, the devil's in the detail of all this stuff.
Yeah, and it would have evolved over a period of time, because obviously Colt was working there and honing his craft. But it wasn't a collaboration. It was something that evolved over time, and I think that causes clubs that are keen to restore real challenges. It's like,
where do you want to restore it to?
What do you restore to?
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to go back to, because a lot of it was changed because it wasn't that good, and certainly the courses that have had architecture involvement over the years, it's a real challenge.
People who listen to our pods religiously will probably get bored of me saying this, but I can never hold back from saying it. But like the butterfly effect's really big, right? So you got Sunningdale, Willie Park Jr., kind of really, really kind of, we look at now as, the two great inland courses in Great Britain or whatever. At the same time, when he built the Old at Sunningdale, Willie Parr Jr. goes off and builds Hunter Coombe, and as I understand it, essentially breaks himself in the process of trying to make that work.
It was his money.
And probably geography and whatnot. And so much of, Hunter Coombe is still a great golf club. If anyone from Hunter Coombe listens to this podcast, will be like, well, hang on, we're hardly like, it's not rags and riches, but how much of that is actually the product of just the history and the geography and the way the wider world has evolved around London versus being that bit further out, or what, a second course being added by Colt. We'd probably talk, talk about those two clubs in completely different lights today, couldn't we, really? Because Hunter Coombe's got some incredible stuff. Fourth green, is it? Fifth green?
There's loads of incredible greens and earthworks
features,
as well.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and
because it's not all bomb created around Hunter Coombe. People think that's all bombs dropped, isn't
urban
it?
myth. Yeah,
it's not right. They were dropping them after flying over London or something.
I don't think there might be a...
You think that's natural earthworks? Like human earthworks into the natural landscape,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, yeah. But you see this a lot. So the sort of lore of London, and when we look at golf course rankings in this country, I mean, it's definitely south biased. Mm. So All Woodley, talking about where we're going in a couple of weeks again, if that was further south, it would be ranked much, much higher, in my opinion. Yeah. Although people do travel obviously now, but it's a big advantage being in that sort of Surrey Berkshire sandbelt.
And Greenfee as well. I mean, I always look at, really good ranking if you want to find some interesting courses to play, is find the best courses under £50 or under £100, because it shines a light on interesting architecture, different experiences where they're not all going to have a locker room attendant and, a massive menu and all that kind of great stuff. But then what they end up being is actually they become just a ranking based on of obscurity to get to. So it's like Sillerth and Solway. Well, it's cheaper because it's harder to get to, but it's still a bloody good golf course. Yeah. Or Seton Carew. Yeah, it's also not the easiest place to get to. Yeah. It's cheaper. It's like it's not in the most affluent part of England, So there's all these different things that happen. There's other factors that I think people miss out. Yeah.
And certainly with the price of green fees in this country, do you see David, UK Golf Guy, published?
Yeah, really good resource when he puts that up.
It's brilliant, yeah, but it's also terrifying. So the top 100 golf courses, I don't know what the average price increase was.
The top 10 were all like north of 275.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do a cheap golf
And
trip.
that can't be
playing-
architecture then, because then that's got to be pricing in
That's just
so
a
many of the other
knock-off effect of
factors.
American golf, though, isn't it? Like, well, the problem is what we've talked about this before. Is when we were in, we did a large part of our traveling early days in the pandemic when it reopened, and we were in Scotland a lot. I think probably one of the first series we did was up in Scotland, and we
and
played.
the Americans weren't able to come
There
over.
was no travel.
Yeah.
And these places were like largely not empty, but they were. It wasn't like it is now. We returned maybe a year later when we were doing the Old Tom series we did with Scotland where golf began, and
Yeah.
looked at those, and we stayed in North Berwick. Remember, we stayed in North Berwick, and it suddenly was like I didn't recognise it. It was like 4-ball after 4-ball with caddy after caddy. And it was
You
just
see
like,
it. It's not a great. It's
Yeah.
not,
You
it's not a
can't
great
blame
side,
the
but it's
clubs.
like
It's just
wow, this has changed the
it's just a
culture of this golf
complete
course.
Yeah.
money in. Like,
Playing
if
that
you- if you're-
2-ball on a sunny summer's evening and flicking
But
around
North
with you
Berwick's
and
an
Bruce
interesting one
in
because
3
your
hours,
dad-
and then it's like,
Your dad played North
Well,
Berwick.
again,
like
it's like
30,
it's like the
40 years
rhetoric.
ago.
Yeah,
before
came
it
home.
before it was cool.
I remember in the
yeah.
early 90s, I'd have been like 7. He got home from a trip to Scotland and he played, some of the great clubs in Scotland on a
Yeah,
trip, and
it
he was
used to be
excited, and he said,
40,
but Sam,
50 quid.
I played North Berwick West, and let me tell you, this course was unbelievable. We
Yeah.
paid £8, and it was,
Yeah.
I mean, this was not in the 1960s, like
Yeah.
this is early 90s, and he was like, he'd have had no record on social media, he'd had no pictures, no reference point, other than a few people had probably said, you should go and play that, it's really bloody good, and
Yeah.
then had followed up and paid what would have been probably 10 quid at Muirfield and about 4 quid for North Berwick, and
But-
been like blown away.
But I think
But now North Berwick's 275, 300 quid to play.
Yeah, but also some of these the economies of these things actually drive you to go and find some more interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we're very lucky in England because we've got such strength in depth. There is so much cool stuff that
Is England the best country for diverse architecture in the UK? In the
I
world,
mean,
rather?
I haven't travelled widely enough to say it's the best in the world, but I mean it's pretty damn good, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you
Well, I'd say, England's the only place that, like, if you talk about diverse architecture, Scotland is like the king of links. Obviously, it's got some of the most fabulous links golf courses on the planet, and England's got some fairly good links.
But the
golf.
depth of
But then you've got the Heathland, the
£20
Parkland, that
courses,
Scotland doesn't have,
£300
but-
courses, everything.
You're a Welshman as well, Simon.
yeah,
And as a pair, as a brace of Welshmen,
yeah.
it's quite upsetting that Wales really lacks the diversity and lacks the punch that perhaps the rest of British. Isles
Yeah,
have
and there's a
in
lot of good
golf.
coastline in Wales, isn't there? But they
Yeah.
kind of they struggled a bit building good 9-hole courses on the good land, and then in the panic to go to 18, bought some farmers' fields and made crap 18 holes,
Yeah.
which that's not unusual. But yeah, the breadth of really good quality golf. So I've just been at Beau d'Isère today, which
Fowler.
have you guys been to?
I've never played. It's
No.
one of the very few in the Midlands.
I mean-
Shout out to a certain follower of ours that is trying very, very hard to get us there.
who?
A gentleman by the name, I'm sure he won't mind, Tom Price, is desperate.
Oh,
trying
yeah,
to get
yeah,
us
of course.
So
Yeah.
given that, I mean, we're south side of Birmingham here, but that's only just the north side of Birmingham, so it's pretty local.
Very close to Little Aston and
Yeah,
that other
and-
place that held the Ryder Cup once.
Yeah, just past there. But it doesn't take. We're within an hour, and you haven't played it, and it's unbelievable. It's the most fantastic bit of terrain. It's great to see playing it today that they've taken out loads of trees, been redoing some bunkers, but as a set of greens that haven't really been changed from what I can see. Herbert Fowler design. The greens are just incredible, and
He started with the greens
Is
and
he
worked
one of
his way
those-
back, didn't
it's
he?
just
Is he one of the most underrated architects, Nick Fowler?
Yeah,
I
go on
wouldn't-
then. Who's your favourite?
I
Who's
wouldn't
your
say
most
he's
under-
probably.
I
I wouldn't say he's underrated. I mean, he did stuff in America. He designed the 18th hole at Pebble Beach that they play. That was a shorter hole.
Is that right?
Made it a par 5.
Is that right? I did not know that.
I didn't know that.
That's that you'd expect that to be so. Given the fact we see Pebble Beach so much, like that's That's a real nugget. That'll be on Sky next year, because there's a few pundits that listen to this that their ears have pricked up if they've lasted an hour and 20 of this pod.
I'll be surprised if they haven't talked about it, because it's quite well.
I've never heard that they've said, Herbert Fowler, obviously.
Yeah, the 18th
Walton
hole
Heath
was
Berkshire. He built the 18th here. It's like, that's obscure.
So yeah, I think Fowler is pretty well spoken of, well regarded. I wouldn't call him underrated. I mean, Abercrombie. If you look at the stuff he's done at the Addington, which it turns out was done alongside Colt.
What about Croom?
I think Coombe Hill as well.
Arthur Croom, yeah, he did.
I know nothing about Croom.
So he didn't really
and
do
yeah,
it.
he had that firm
deal
with Abercrombie, Fowler and Simpson.
Yeah. So
did he just come along for the ride and do
well,
sweet
no, I think
FA?
he did Lip Hook, and that was about it, I think.
Right.
And then obviously Simpson would have done a bit because he was living there. But no, underrated. I mean, probably the one that
Strantz.
Mike Strantz is, I played 2 of his courses, Caledonia in Myrtle Beach and Tobacco Road, and they're majestic places. Yeah, really, and again, a bit like who I think is probably the most underrated, Tom Simpson. He was a fantastic artist. But yeah, if I was to pick somebody who isn't spoken about enough, it's Tom Simpson. I think
Baltrais.
Tom Simpson is like the connoisseur, but we are so biased. There is a conflict of interest here because Blackwell is a Fowler Simpson, but mostly Simpson is.
Didn't Mackenzie design the 13th at Blackwell?
I think it was Bobby Jones. Yeah,
we'll come back onto that, but no. So obviously Simpson Fowler. Would you look at Blackwell and say that's actually much more Simpson?
It feels more Simpson, yeah. And you can see
when you say that, bring that to life because I have no idea what that means.
So the intricacies of the greens,
artistic flair with bunkering.
The bunkering, certainly. I mean, we're skewed a bit by the sketches that you left behind.
Right-hand bunkers are a Simpson thing.
Well, I think just general
didn't like the slicer, did he?
Asymmetrical bunkers were pretty consistent with most of those good architects, but it feels more Simpson, in my opinion. I'll be interested to see. I mean, Fowler, although there is one photo of a bunker, not that I've got a photographic memory of bunkers in black and white or anything, but there is a photo of one bunker on the red course at the Berkshire, which is nothing like anything else I've seen Fowler design, which is a ridiculously intricately lace-edged bunker, which Simpson is obviously.
That just wouldn't be.
And it's
Fowler's go-to.
Well, I look at it and think, was Simpson visiting the site that day?
But Simpson never contributed on that, did he? Really?
No, I don't think it was documented. It was supposed to be pure Fowler. Yeah, but then you go and wonder how much of it was the guys building it on the ground.
That's what I was about to say. So when you look at somewhere like Blackwell, and you look at it and think this has got more of a Simpson feel. You know, the lace edge bunkering that we've put in place, we've worked really hard over the last 7-8 years to bring a lot of that back. I say bring it back to put a lot of that in, because that's what Simpson bunkers were like. Are you looking at it because that's what it's like now and thinking, or is it kind of more
it's not the bunker style. So the slopes on the greens and how the surrounds feed into the sort of external parts of the greens. So
you love the greens at Blackwell, don't you?
The greens are outstanding.
They're just
Blackwell.
Natural green sites.
Yeah, they're wonderful. And if you go and see New Zealand, which is
an outstandingly good golf course,
New
and
Zealand,
it builds just gradually in profile. Like it's a majestic golf course.
Yeah, it is a lovely place. But New Zealand, which is it's got a similar sort of vibe to Blackwell, in that it's quite an old school, lovely, quite.
But the course is very walkable, taxing on the brain,
But the routing
thoughtful.
The routing at New Zealand wasn't Simpson; that was Muir Ferguson, who designed that, and then Simpson's just come in and done his stuff on the greens and bunkers, pretty much, which Frank Pont is doing just a fantastic job restoring now with CDP. But you look at how the bunkers flow into the spines and the bunkers go into the greens. So actually the size of the entire hazard is much bigger than just the bunker itself, because if you're playing out of a bunker, you're generally playing onto a spine that runs down into the greens, and the bunkers are connected to the greens. I mean, you see so many.
It's like Rain Man.
So many architects now, and they're posting stuff on Twitter. Modern guys, where you've got greenside bunkers that are so disconnected from the green complex, and there'd be a big area of rough in between. It just drives me mad.
You're just wasting it, aren't you? The whole thing.
Yeah, and you look at...
But the Golden Age greats were really good at tying everything in together, weren't they? Everything had a purpose, but everything contributed to make it greater than the sum of its parts. Because the constituent parts of New Zealand or Blackwell, like, on paper, are not particularly great. They are modest in length. They're not necessarily the greatest land, not wild topography changes or anything like that, but they create something where collectively it really hums. Yeah. Baltray, I'd put 100% in that category when we're talking about Tom Simpson's stuff.
Well, I've not played Baltray.
I mean, it's just the most outrageously good. And so
is it good enough to consider just blowing it up and...
Well, I know that there's a huge amount of debate. I've not seen the plans. There's a few quirky things, like the 2 green thing on 17 is like a bit of an acquired taste for sure. But the holes and the way it's connected, it's just superb. Like, I mean, there's pretty much I'd say from 2 or 3 right through to like 15, 16, your jaw's on the floor at Baltray.
Yeah.
And the bunkerless holes are the best.
Well, there's just not enough.
The bunkerless holes are absolutely extraordinary. They're so natural looking, it's untrue.
There's just not enough Tom Simpson around in this country. And there's a load of...
He works a lot in Belgium, is that right?
Yeah, Belgium and France. And he did a lot of private estate
courses.
courses.
He arrived everyone a Rolls Royce, which is back to Tom's point.
And
it's
a
like,
beret.
I get the sense this guy wasn't rooting around in the weeds of bunkers. Like,
is there loads of Simpson photos of him?
There's only one of him on a lathe, isn't there, under candlelight or whatever it is.
I've got a good one of him playing in a competition with Molly Gawley. So Tom Simpson's assistant was the first female golf architect.
Really?
Molly Gawley, yeah. She's a very accomplished lady golfer. In the 30s.
I've heard the name, but no more details.
Yeah, she worked. I think she worked with Tom Simpson at Ballybunion.
No way.
Yeah, so she was very good golfer turned architect. So there's a good photo, and some of the private estate courses are. He built a putting course as a wedding present. I think I'm right in saying it's a wedding present for Joyce Weatherhead.
Really?
Yeah, he did.
That
he
is
built
a putting course.
A putting course at her house, which is now a National Trust property called Night Hayes, I think.
What?
Yeah.
Is it still there?
The putting course isn't there, but
could we resurrect it? Yeah, we could resurrect it.
It's really cool. And there's also
is it like Himalayas-esque?
In the garden. And there's a putting course. Just going down putting course rabbit hole for a second. There's
Little Aston's obviously a great one
in Buxton in the park
in Derbyshire.
In the park in the middle of Buxton. There was a putting course designed by Alison Mackenzie.
Still there?
No, it's not still there, but the land is still there apparently. So people that
we could go and do like a pilgrimage there.
Was this like a common thing?
It was a thing. Yeah, putting courses or sort of approach courses as they called them, like little short par 3, like 50 yarders, was quite a big thing. Seaside Resorts would have them, and I mean the
Palace Hotel took a great short course.
Yeah, the Palace Hotel.
Is that actually got provenance, or is that just something that was?
I think,
is that something
I
they stuck
don't think that was
pins?
Designed by anyone
but
famous.
Like I played that
but
when I was a real little kid,
so
and
they
I
had
remember loving it.
They had the British Par 3 tournament there for
great
years,
Par 3 course.
and now they've moved it to Nelcote Hall Hotel, which is I used to work there as a kid actually. What
did you do there?
Worked behind the bar.
Wasn't an architect.
Met my wife. She was working as a waitress
in a cocktail bar,
and it was in the cocktail bar that I worked in. Yeah. So anyway,
can we try and steer us back on topic? Before we do, there are 2 things I want to cover off, and a quick answer to: is there a space? Because you're a panelist and course rater. I don't think you're not anymore. I know you don't like doing it. You're always like, I'd never use it. I never say it because it's just like it's crass. But like, is there space in the rankings for a £35 green fee golf course in the GB&I 100?
Yeah, absolutely. But
isn't the problem as soon as you're in the GB&I top 100, you just double it or triple it, and that's
And
I mean, Silith, like the last bastion of like we are just amazing.
Still
golf.
are cheap as chips, relatively
It's like-
speaking.
I think it's nearly 3 figures.
it's irresistible.
It might
Their
even be
members
3
clubs,
figures
isn't it?
now.
I don't know.
yeah, so I know one of the panelists, so Clyde Johnson, Cunning Golf, works for Renaissance. It will be
Former guest of the pod.
of course, yeah. So he and I were both panelists on. Well, it was Golf World, then went to National Club Golf.
Rand's panel.
And I mean, he's the most well-travelled guy I know.
Played like 700-800.
Yeah,
like
just-
courses, like I posted pictures of Almouth Village 5th hole, and it was like one of those course and hole things, and you know it's absolutely bombed because no one knew it and no one commented.
Yeah.
And someone put in Almouth 4th, and Clyde just put a comment below. No, it's the 5th.
Yeah.
Clyde
So-
had never like weigh in on the
Yeah,
subject. It's just
he's the
beneath
most
him, but he knew it immediately.
incredibly knowledgeable guy. But you saw when the two of us were both panelists, there were clubs in there that probably wouldn't have gotten there before.
Really?
Because, yeah, we both appreciate the same sort of thing, which isn't having your clubs taken off you when you go in the car park
Pyramids
and
of
your shoes.
Proves, yeah.
No,
Doesn't do it for me.
doesn't do it for me. No.
Do you think Doak's confidential guide was like a seminal moment of turning from that position of like, because he was going to places like Cleve Hill, Pennard, places that weren't really on the map, and being like, yeah, these are places you need to go to.
I'd say Sonoma could change the fortunes of quite significantly.
Do you think that was like a big turning
the
point?
rankings, wouldn't it?
Probably, but I mean, there were so few people that actually read it. I mean, I don't know how many original copies he made. It was a few hundred, if that. So it was still a pretty niche.
Yeah.
But that gave it to the thought leaders that then,
Yeah,
or
that
the supposed
information spread
thought
widely.
leaders that
Yeah.
then.
But there's a lot of these things where you see these movements in. I mean, craft beer is the classic, isn't it? Where you get these sort of slightly underground movements that then become a bit more mainstream, and then you end up with a mainstream, slightly diluted version of what was there before. And I think you're seeing a lot of that with the golf course, certainly with the restoration movement.
Yeah. And it becomes a bit of an echo, particularly things like this podcast, they become an echo
Yeah,
chamber.
we're-
Because what we're not interviewing is guests that would, die on a hill to say, okay, we're giving the Belfry an unfair hard time here, but we're not bringing on someone that really thinks the Belfry is the greatest golf course in Britain
No.
to have a right reply. And the whole world becomes an echo chamber, doesn't it?
But equally, this restoration movement that we've got in the UK at the moment, it is becoming a bit the same.
Yeah.
So the sand scrape thing,
Wow.
I mean, it's become a complete and utter parody of itself.
But then America, the square edge
I
rain
would-
stuff,
yeah,
is
and I'd
that-
also push back. I think the Sandscape bashing is big out there, and you are seeing it in more and more places. However, for places that it fits, like Prince's, it works incredibly well because the whole landscape is sandy. It can increase. You can get rid of meadowgrass areas completely, and you can turn 4.5 hour rounds into 3.5 hour rounds, and it just makes the whole thing. It has extended perhaps beyond the scope of natural sandscape, and I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But it's certainly like, I think it does get a bashing, like a serious bashing.
And that's the challenge with movements and fashion, isn't it? So at some point in 20 years, we'll look back and go, God, doesn't that look? Wasn't that excessive?
God, where have all the bloody trees gone?
Yeah, and the question
Aren't
of
our
what,
courses short?
what-
We should never have kept. We should have actually just bought loads more land to tee off from.
why is there no trees on these
There was
courses?
one what you
So-
haven't got.
But as to where we go with architecture to be different, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the answer is. I mean, you do see.
there were a
some of
few
this- the
pioneers, weren't there?
Well, there's geometric stuff that you see. So they've tried to restore or reimagine some of the Rainer type features on a few courses. Is it Arcadia Bluffs
Right.
in the States? And then you see the odd hole with the sort of square greens and geometric bunkers. But that again, it looks like somebody's doing a bad parody of Rayner.
I think there's space for diversity.
I've got a question. You touched on it earlier on a little bit. There is a movement of restoration, going back to whatever. You can go too far, because if you talked about something that old, you could say, okay, let's restore it. Yeah, no, let's go back and find out.
Quite great.
It was blind shots and you know, playing whatever, and it's. Is the restoring of some of these courses like a vanity project to restore it because you're saying we've got a cult classic or whatever it is, or we've got a Blackwell, we've got a Fowler Simpson classic and whatever it is? Is that, you know, do you think that's the right thing to be doing, or should we be slightly more progressive in our thinking and being, this is what it is, but we can make it better, which I think some people are kind of afraid to do, just to like, that's what we can improve on it then.
Yeah, and if you look at the evolution of a lot of these places, they were being made better. I guess the challenge is when people continually believe they can do something better, which I don't think there's many people practicing that would blow up an original Mackenzie or Colt Par 3 because they think they could do something way better. There's not many. It does happen. It's happened fairly recently with a course that will be on TV this summer.
Spill the beans.
Well, he's talking about Hoylake, isn't he?
But,
obviously.
I mean, it does, and there's different reasons for some of that stuff because of TV.
But will that create a better product for that? I mean, this is not going into a podcast debating the 15th hole at Hoylake. I'm not letting it go there because that's not what this is about.
That's a completely
but
different
there's loads
thing,
of different use cases. The game's different. There's
the average golf club.
I think it's really dangerous to be wedded to this nostalgic view that no one will ever be better than Colt and Mackenzie were. Or McDonald and Tillinghast or whatever. Like, I think that's a really dangerous world to get into. But I equally think it's very easy to then walk back to the cookie cutter work of the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I put something on Twitter or something the other day when they were playing the women's the chevron, and it was literally like the wonderful Nicholas signature course that weaves its way through the woodland and past some of the brilliant real estate on the property. And I was like, that is exactly where architecture went wrong.
And then they're at Wilshire, which just looks absolutely incredible the week after. But the average golf club though, so back to the original question, I think would massively benefit from having a really good understanding of their heritage,
their roots. And
I'm not saying restore blindly just for history's sake, but having an understanding of the original architecture and the intent of it. Why wouldn't you do that? If you had a Capability Brown.
Tom didn't know who he was.
So it's famous.
He did not know Tom.
But you're going to the spring meeting in All Woodley.
Yeah.
There's a really nice Capability Brown garden there.
He had no idea who he was.
So Capability Brown and Humphrey Repton, they're the kind of the two big landscape architects who basically monopolised country house landscaping in the UK. If you don't
artistry,
don't know.
Really.
And they would make
generally. Can we have a moment for his name? His parents called him Capability.
Yeah, because they knew he's an extremely competent young man at birth.
Yeah, I don't think that was his name. I think it was Lancelot.
You'd never look.
Oh, his name wasn't Capability.
It was Lancelot Capability Brown, I'm pretty sure.
Well, so Capability was his middle name.
It was an effective
it was his
middle
nickname
name,
because Lancelot
wasn't
he was cool enough.
Yeah.
But if
I'm
you
not
look
calling
at
you Capability. What's your real name? Lancelot. It's a good name.
But if you look at a lot of the golf course architects of the Golden Age, they were practicing exactly the same intent that both Capability Brown and Humphrey Repton were trying to practice, which is imitating nature but in a controlled way.
But they would have been almost peers and talking a little bit.
I don't know if they were around the same time, That's not my
Is there a
area
golden
of
age
expertise.
of, a golden age
There'd
of
be
garden
100%
design?
people like you in garden landscaping.
You go to these country houses, and they're all pretty much beautiful open fields with strategically placed big prominent trees, a stand of pines, a river, or maybe a lake that is made to look like a river. It was all artificially created, and
Bruce doesn't have kids, he can't identify, but the three of us sat here can all
you
identify
go
with
to
having
these
to
places.
traipse
Yeah,
around country
exactly.
houses.
But
at
if you look
weekends.
at it through the eyes of a golf course architect, which I quite often do, bored whilst waiting
Whilst
for my
traipsing.
Yeah, traipsing. It would be
Horrible verb.
akin to just planting conifer trees all over this spectacularly maintained landscape, which is kind of what happens to our golf courses. And if you read what Colt and Mackenzie, amongst others, were talking about, imitating nature and having a beautiful place with long vistas, the average British golf club at least would benefit massively by just doing some pretty basic things, understanding a bit about their heritage, and
Because all they'd see is playing lines, wouldn't they, all
I
of a
could
sudden?
push back a little bit and say, you know, the heritage
love
of
this debate.
Blackwell. No, but the heritage of Blackwell is a 9-hole golf course. It was built in 1893.
Yeah. We don't want to restore
The
that.
in
wouldn't want
1923, which is roughly 30 years later, is when Fowler and Simpson came in.
yeah, because Colt was too expensive. Did you know that?
Do you think?
Was
Yeah.
that the reason? Was it?
Yeah, Colt
I
was
know
considered.
they looked at a couple and Simpson was chosen as the. But
Yeah.
you know, again,
But
the
like-
history
but like, where'd
books
you go
are
back
written
to?
by the victors, aren't they? And they're not. No one's going to write the club centenary and says, "Yeah, we cheaped out on
Yeah.
Simpson because it felt like a better deal and Colt was in demand." But it's a really fair reason to go with someone else.
Yeah.
And actually, it's given us a really quite a
But
unique
what
product.
I mean is, like, how far do you go back?
Exactly.
You're
You
not
wouldn't
going
go
to
back
restore a
to the-
9-hole.
So one of the things, and I was quite heavily involved with a restoration plan at Copteeth, which we worked with Frank Pont on, and the idea was to restore Colt's original intent, playing intent, rather than stick all
The
the
actual
bunkers
holes,
back at
yeah.
180 yards with forced carries to make it interesting, because the world's moved on from that, and there's maintenance regimes, different expectations of turf management, all that sort of stuff. So, but the intent was really important, and the history of the club, you can't shake the fact it was designed by Harry Colt, and actually, if we marketed it in the right way, was a really good way of us attracting a good level of membership and green fee players. And that's what I would advocate most clubs do if they've got some sort of historic interest in the past.
Can we come
Yes,
back to that?
I'd like to go back.
Because
I think I'm out.
have you done them all?
I think so.
You
Okay.
can't have done 6 faux pas by now, surely not. That's it.
What did you have on the list?
Is
I don't think-
Blatchworth Park, we did that. Wentworth, we did that. Mackenzie and Ross Mungo Park, yeah. we've done
Are
it.
there any stuff that are half truths that stick in your mind as being like, this is totally overblown? Be it Ross saucer shaped
Well,
greens.
there's a golf course not
Yeah.
far from here, designed by Tom Simpson. It's called Blackwell. You're probably familiar with it.
Yeah.
It's got a par
I love
3.
this.
Oh,
This is
God.
why I knew I was.
It's got a par 3, the 13th hole. Very good par 3.
It's a cracking par 3,
It's
to
got-
be fair.
Yeah,
It's an
so
unbelievably
it
good par
starts,
3.
It starts with a tee, and at the other end there's a green, and there's a little bit of water in between. And apparently that was the inspiration for several holes at Augusta.
Well, so
You-
the
or you
club,
could
the
tell-
club,
you
the
could
club
tell your
main,
story.
the club are really passionate that the 13th is essentially a blueprint of how Jones, when he played there the day after the Open in 1930, then went off to design Augusta and then built the 12th hole on that. Now, I have my own reservations on that as a member, because I would say that'd be somewhat more believable if he wasn't designing the course with the world's greatest golf course architect at the time, and he didn't play it when he was completely knackered, having been borderline dead for
Yeah.
most of the back end of 1930 on the Grand
And
Slam year.
imagine trying to drive.
I know he roofed a drive on 15 only 2 holes later.
Really?
Because he completely roofed it, just cleared the ditch, and then hit an absolute worldie of a Baffy or something up the left and scuttled it in. You remember where you blew it in the Masters Friday when you were level par?
Yeah, thanks.
You should have won that, and then you just threw
you
sod
gave
on the
me
ball.
Pims. Yeah.
I gave you a Pims and then I gave you a really solid yardage, and then you just chunked sod on it.
Riddled with nerves.
But I think, and I know Stoke Park lay claim to something very similar.
So I think that was the original.
Sometimes the
16th.
story is better than the actual reality, and that's maybe where we're going full circle with this pod. Is sometimes actually that story just adds colour to the round, whether it's right or not. Sometimes it's just nice, you know.
Yeah, and actually one of the great things about golf is the history and the stories.
Yeah. They don't all need to be true. I mean, New Zealand, I really want to talk about New Zealand, is one that I've got in my head, because you mentioned Muir Ferguson. And I don't want to let you go without you telling us a little bit about the history of New Zealand, because it's fascinating, isn't it?
So then, the New Zealand club
isn't there like a racetrack, and it's a Daily Mail's boss's son, or
so
son-in-law, or something. Honestly, this is nuts.
Very wealthy landowner in, I think it was White's Club it was just like a gentleman's club in London, was sitting down one day, and a few of his pals said, you should build yourself a golf course, you got enough land. And they pointed to the guy in the corner reading the newspaper, Ferguson, which was Muir Ferguson, good golfer. You know a bit about building golf courses, you should build him a golf course. And off he did, and off he went and built him a golf course. And I can't remember the chap's name now, who the landowner, he was Lord something or other.
Does it begin with an N?
I don't think it was
Norcroft or Norcold.
No, I don't think it was, but he might have been a publishing magnate, maybe.
I think it was Daily Mail.
It's
not Norcliffe.
No, I don't think it was. I don't think it was that, because he was the guy who funded Varden's tour of America, wasn't it?
Was it? Right.
Yeah, okay. I don't think. He was in.
This is a danger with trying to go toe to toe with Haines.
I don't think it was Lord Norcliffe, but anyway, I should know.
But then there was a racetrack as well.
So Brooklands Raceway. So he was a big motor racer into like in the early days of motor vehicles. Built himself a banked raceway,
like a sort of NASCAR thing.
Yeah, like a big 45-degree slope all the way around, and the remnants of the track are still there. So there's like chunks of it where you can still see the banked raceway, and a lot of the motor racing companies are sort of headquartered.
Yeah,
down.
Mercedes is right.
Mercedes Racing is there. Yeah, and then I think his wife was. And it was a bit of a fashion in the days. Like there was adventurous women that would be aviators. So in a world where they probably couldn't quite vote yet, but they were doing crazy things like in the early days of aviation, flying these little rustic biplanes. So he built her an aerodrome. So there was an aerodrome, a raceway, and New Zealand golf course.
Our times have changed.
Yeah, what a brilliant little playground. But I think it's called New Zealand, and I think...
Didn't someone own a colony or something?
No, I think the story was it was meant to be a getaway that felt as far away from London as you could possibly be, which was New Zealand.
I thought, I've heard the colony thing as well.
Okay.
But aren't these stories great? Because, like, and look,
I
a
thought
day in
that
New Zealand's obviously
Horsley.
you're very lucky because it's such a private place, and you know it's really not overrun. It's difficult to get into and to get onto the course and stuff. But when you're there and you see the lockers and you see the names and stuff, and you can make up stories about all of them. We've done that, obviously, down at the spring meeting last year. I think we were pissed at Prince's in the evening. We're talking nonsense about the history of the game, and as we kind of get, we're all quite dry, sarcastic characters, got into sort of creating these fictitious plot lines.
Yeah.
Anyway, Simon's in the halfway hut, which ironically is out on the 12th or something at George's.
Yes.
It's like the 2/3 hut, really, at George's. And we go in, and there's a few of us. Ryan's in there. There's a few other guys, and they have these tea boxes at George's called the Pinto teas, and one of them is you'd come up with this person called Fiona Pinto, which is a affected character, and been saying to people that, oh yeah, Fiona Pinto's quite involved at George's, but didn't she design was it the socks at Fisher's Island?
The socks, yeah.
The socks. At so he was telling this story in the halfway house. The woman who's in there serving the soup and the sausage
I've got
rolls.
these stripy socks on, and so yeah, these are Fisher Island members only version, and people go, oh, that's pretty niche, that is, given that we're into niche golf things. And then this rather...
You started saying it's Fiona Pinto. Obviously, there's Pinto
This rather
teas
abrasive woman behind the bar went, that is... Fiona Pinto definitely wouldn't do that. I know her.
That's absolutely...
Her father's been a member here, and she would definitely not do that. That's a load of BS. Which we thought was amusing because we were just winding people up. But yeah.
I'm going to give you two questions.
Hang on a sec. Is there a level of knowledge you get to? Because, like, you're pretty much our go-to guy for historical knowledge. So anything image-based, or just if we need to just fact-check something, we go to you and say, hey, is this right? And you come back with yay or nay, and you pretty much tell us nay. And then
doesn't fact-check everything, in fairness. That's where we make mistakes.
Yeah, the moment we do make mistakes when we don't do it. Is there a level of knowledge you can get to where you can suddenly, that no one's, you can just, now I can just make it up because no one's going to question me anymore?
Yeah, if you have a degree of authority in the way you deliver it, yeah, I think you probably could. I mean, it's worked on you guys.
It's back to no. Jokes aside, it's back
on a podcast.
No,
about it.
It is. It's like back to the point of Valley of
My
the
dad used to say
Blind. One-eyed
bullshit
man is
baffles brains. That
Yeah.
was his
Of
thing.
course it does. Like, I mean, like Valley of the Blind, the one-eyed man is king. Like, if you deliver it with conviction, and that's why I think the role of a course architect is actually not always steeped in competence. Certainly their success. You know, there's loads of people who pick up, because if you can stand up and deliver a compelling message to people, you will mobilise people behind you, and that's ultimately what a lot of these things are about.
And I always
not
took the view,
podcasting. I'm talking about us. Like, you know, I think for us, a lot of it's a learning journey, and I think maybe at times I try and profess like I know too much, but maybe I know a little bits about like the Muir Ferguson thing, and I'm speculating, but it comes from a good place. But when you trade heavily off it, some people just deliver a very compelling message, rightly or wrongly.
And a lot of people are doing it as salespeople, whether it's an architect or a
broadband
golf historian. Yeah, I mean, I sell broadband, so I'm not really into selling my golf wares. But a lot of architects do exactly that, and always have done. So, I mean, if you see a architect having a pitch to generally a pretty lay population, so a golf committee that maybe know a bit about golf but don't know anything about golf design, or they might not be well travelled. It's hard work, and you've got to
steer them away from the work on the Triple SI ground, and you say to them, well, actually, you go for this, and the stuff that loads the construction budget's a little higher, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're doing a sales job, and I'm by no means a historian. I'm a sort of avid amateur who's passionate about it, but there are professional historians out there that are seriously impressive. And you get the knowledge through, you can't really cheat it, you just got to get it through tenure and study and experience. And
I'm going to push back a little bit, Haines, because
it's your role on this podcast as a contrarian.
Well, no, but you are a very impressive historian, and I wouldn't put yourself down like that, because the level of knowledge you've attained over your lifetime of dedicating to golf is truly
catamite to exceptional,
inspirational. And I think it sounds like a perfect moment at 1 hour 50 minutes.
Well, I have one question before I want to get him out of it.
Thank you.
No one's going to.
So I've got one question I want to ask him before I let him get out of it, and then I've got a deal that I want to make with him before he signs off the pod. Is that all right?
Yep.
My first question, and I'll come on to the deal as well as part of this. First question is, I want to know where in golf history, what moment in time would you travel back to if I gave you a reverse trip in a time machine? Where would you go and when? Beware of it. I'll let you muse on that for a second. And the second question before I let you get out of here, will you do an Eclectic 18 episode with us on holes from the past? I.e.
holes that you can't play anymore?
Or holes that were maybe a lot better back then. Would you complete an Eclectic 18?
Yeah.
So an Eclectic 18 based on like, oh my God, I mean, you might not pick the first at so-and-so now, but like, oh my God, you should have seen it back then. Yeah. That type of thing. I think that would be an amazing episode. And then the second question, which is, I think, hopefully a good question to close this on, is when would you go back to in history? And
in my time machine.
Do you think you could do an Eclectic 18 from 18 different architects?
I prefer my idea.
No. I'm just wondering whether that's possible.
Yeah, there'd be 18. There's like a guy that made like works of art with. There's all sorts of random architects out there. But it's just we only ever talk about like an echo chamber of half a dozen in the UK and 3 or 4 in America.
Architects.
Yeah, you definitely
there are
could.
Definitely there though.
Oh yeah, of course they are. But
not sure how good it would be. So time machine. So I'd probably go. Can I have 2?
Where, sorry?
I want to have
He
two.
wants to. Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you
give
know.
it two.
I want to go to the 11th green at Merion, 1930, which I was lucky enough to play Merion a few years ago, and we were there the day before they have their annual celebration dinner for that moment, and it's a black tie event, and everybody at the dinner walks down to the 11th green. All the members
Quite close to the clubhouse, Richie Ramsey said.
not
like
really.
maybe
It's kind of down
still a
in,
way out,
in the corner, and they all walk down in the black tie and toast.
For our listeners that don't know this, we're talking about
Bobby Jones. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Bobby Jones Grand Slam completion.
Bobby Jones Grand Slam moment,
Yeah.
beating Eugene Homans on the 11th hole
Which
in the
would have been
36
what,
hole
the
match.
30? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd like to go there just because it was such an
Great
important
photo.
moment in
If you go to the
golf.
Blackwell Golf Club social media page,
Yeah,
and scroll through a carousel of photos of yours I posted
yeah.
on there, and follow the Blackwell Golf Club social media page. I'd encourage you to do that at the same time. But
So-
you can see the scene, and it's electric. They're all charging, aren't they?
Yeah, it's amazing, and some of the crowds following him at that event are quite spectacular. So that would be one, and the other is I'd like to go and stay in a tent with Colton Crump for that week he spent at Pine Valley in late May 1913.
Late May. If we can get the date, if
Eating
Michael Wolff listens to this podcast, which I doubt,
20th and 22nd.
he can
something like
illuminate
that.
it.
Eating snapper soup and talking about building amazing golf holes in sand and pine. That would be a dream.
Simon Haines, you've been a very good and comprehensive
It's
guest to
been-
this
It's
podcast.
been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Are you going to say adios?
Adios.
Watch this.